So now for the men in the audience, we're going to help you guys learn how to pleasure your female partner. The best way you can. We'll start off with 5 tips for you guys that you can take home and use to spice up your sex life. So the first one that we're going to talk about is scheduling time for sex. So what do you mean by scheduling time for sex, Kelly? Well, if you think about it, when we were younger, we scheduled time for sex, right? Maybe that partner wasn't available in our house. We were like, Friday's going to be a date. Maybe there's going to be sex. And so we had that anticipation and we didn't have any pressure until then, right? So you had this one time you were looking forward to. You knew you were going to be dedicated to it, and it was a big turn on to schedule sex that way. Then now enter maybe a relationship, maybe it's a monogamous relationship. You guys are living together and we have this myth that we should just have it whenever, all the time, but we don't, right? We're always too busy doing other things. But if you take it back into scheduling it and say, hey, Sunday, let's do this at 2 p.m., then you're like, that's my protected time to do it. It's kind of like exercising, right? You're like, we could really work out whenever we wanted to, but we don't. So if you schedule it and you're like, my workouts are at this exact time, you're much more likely to actually get it done and focus on the task at hand. Yeah. And I think for female partners, right? There's this thing where people expect us all to have this spontaneous desire, which, maybe as a younger person you had because, your hormones are raging. But now as an adult, it's not necessarily there all the time. It takes some effort. One model of sexual function is desire to come first. So a lot of women feel like they're broken and they don't go have sex because they don't have desire for it. But really, my whole theory is desire isn't even necessary for a healthy sex and a healthy relationship. So if you schedule it, and you say you might even look forward to it, or you might just say, you know what? I'll like it once I get there. That's my time slot to have it. Yeah. So guys, schedule it, just say go up to your female partner and say, look, I really wanna make a special night for us, or a special daytime, whatever works for you and I really wanna make this special for us. So can we plan to do this at this time and have open communication with them? Because then they'll have time to get excited about it. Totally. The other thing it does is it takes all the pressure off all the other days, right? Because a lot of women with low desire, or when you have mismatched desire in a relationship, they're always worried is today going to be the day? Am I gonna have to say no? Again, people don't like telling people no, right? So you take all the pressure off of all the other days. So you can just be together not sexually on those days. So it's really nice for that too. Yes, that's awesome. I love that. So another thing that I think a lot of guys don't know is, the very intricacies of female anatomy. So why don't you expand on essentially what is the homologue, or the similarities between male and female anatomy, and how that plays in? Yeah. So we all started out embryologically the exact same way, right? And so the labia on the outside is the homologue of the scrotum in the male, and the clitoris is the homologue of the penis. The myth is that the vagina is where women have pleasure. Now you can touch the clitoris through the walls of the vagina, but the vagina in and of itself is not the organ of sexual pleasure in women. It is the clitoris, and the clitoris is horrifically neglected. But think about your sex education. If you've got any in school, the female sexual organs are usually like the ovaries and the uterus, which aren't involved in much pleasure at all, right? So really nobody gets taught that if the penis is what men use to get pleasure, the clitoris is what the women use to have pleasure. Yes, absolutely. And so the head of the clitoris is like the head of the penis, and it actually has an extension that goes back just like the penis is extended. So a lot of women actually don't get vaginal orgasms. What's the percentage, Kelly? Oh, straight up vaginal orgasms is like 20%. It's really, really low. And the women who do have orgasms with vaginal penetration, it is thought it because they're getting clitoral stimulation from it. Yes. So, absolutely guys. So don't feel like you're doing something wrong because it's very uncommon to get vaginal orgasms. You have to focus your energy on their pleasure organ, which is the clitoris. And if you're interested in your partner, a female partner being more interested in sex, her having a good time in the bedroom is where it's at. If you just do penis and vagina sex and she doesn't have a good time and she doesn't have pleasure, she might be less interested in getting to the party in the first place. Yeah. So all these videos are like thrust this way or thrust that way. I mean, they're probably getting to the point where you're trying to, get some clitoral stimulation from the vagina or the quote-unquote G-spot. Is that like a real thing? Kelly, it depends upon who you ask. It's this. It's not actually a spot that you can like surgically cut out. But it's on the anterior upside of the vagina, kind of underneath where the urethra and bladder is. And it really does stimulate the clitoris more that way. So again, it's not really the vagina. That's the goal. It's stimulating the clitoris. The periurethral complex. It's named after a doctor, Dr. Grafenberg, I believe, And so some people are like, yes, that's everything. And some people are like, whatever, just involve the clitoris and you don't have to find certain spots. Yes. So, I think it's great if you can get your partner to have a vaginal orgasm. But if you really focus on the clitoris, that's where it's at. Absolutely. And the other thing I tell people is, it's an outside job, right? I think a lot of men think deeper, harder. No. This is a woman. She needs to be treated differently than how a man might need to have stimulation to have an orgasm. So focus on the outside structures. Yes. So I think that because it's different for men and women, we talk about how you want to really pleasure your woman in the bedroom is number 3. It's not about you, it's about her. So prioritize her orgasm so that she can enjoy the process and in turn want to pleasure you as well. Absolutely. Yeah. And some things work better than penises do as far as penises are kind of big dub animals, right? Pans are great, mills are great, vibrators are great. There are other things that are designed better than penises to give a woman pleasure. I just call penises big dumb animals. You had said something like use your hands in your mouth, and if they get tired, use something battery-powered. We have technology for a reason, right? Like we could walk around barefoot, but shoes are amazing. Same thing for stimulating women. It's like we've got the things we were born with, but we've got plenty of great technology that works well now. Yes, and your partner will thank you for it. So honestly, this is something that will really spice up your sex life. Women want to feel desired. They want to feel taken care of. They want to feel like somebody's giving them attention and pleasure. Those are all great skills to bring into the bedroom, absolutely. And then number 4 is how do you approach sex? So I made a video recently about how long penetrative sex lasts on average, and it was about a little over 5 minutes. But that doesn't mean that that's the entirety of sex. So let's talk about number 4, which is go slow with sex. Yes. So the data shows that women take 30 to 50 minutes from start of turn on to orgasm. Women or men take about 3 to 5 minutes. So that's a horrible mismatch. And here's the other thing. Women, or people will be like, why do women take so long? Just thinking that thought makes you realize you're thinking in a very male-centric way. Why is the male, the dominant or default time it's supposed to take, right? How fabulous and lucky are we that we can take 30 minutes to have pleasure? So think about women's pleasure in a very different way, and don't always try to fit it into the male perspective of what should happen. The other thought on that is a lot of people really have narrow views of what sex is in our society. Sex is traditionally the penis and vagina. Sex starts when the penis goes in the vagina and it ends when he has orgasm. And then, if she didn't get her turn or her joy, well, then she has a problem, right? To turn that paradigm around and to say intimacy and sex involves all touch of all over the body, and the penis in the vagina is only one little part of it. The majority of women will have orgasms without needing that penis in the vagina. Yeah, absolutely. So I know it's kind of challenging for some guys because you may have issues with premature ejaculation if that's the case. Certainly go see a urologist, we could help you with that. Check out my other video on premature ejaculation where I react to an episode of Sex and the City. I talk a little bit about that. But if you have normal ejaculatory function and you're able to delay your pleasure, it will really pay off for your partner, and really pay off for your sex life. Yeah, I think, if you can take the penis and vagina and maybe save it for later. Work on the female's pleasure first with your other tools, with your other toys with outside stimulation. Save that for later, and really expand your view of what sex means, because we live in a very male-centric society, and it's really hurting women in the bedroom. Yes. And so that brings us to our last point, which is use lube. And I will tell you that so many people don't use lubricant, but it is amazing. So Kelly, you talk to us a little bit about what kind of lubes we should use. Yeah, so there's lots of different types of lube. And before we talk about that, I want to dispel some myths, right? I want to dispel the myth of if she's not wet enough, it means she's not having a good time, or because she's wet, it means she's having a good time. What the lubrication that a woman can produce has nothing to do. Sometimes it has something to do, but oftentimes it has nothing to do with how turned on she is. She is how much she is attracted to you. So don't use her wetness as a measure of anything. Lubrication will only add to that moisture. We're trying to stop any sort of pain or friction. That's bad friction. That's good orgasm friction. That's bad pain and doesn't want to have sex, right? So lubrication just makes everything glide. More. People who use lubrication have more orgasms, have more pleasure in the bedroom. Of course, they've studied this because lube is like $1 billion company, industry. So there's water-based lubes which are really easy to clean up. Those are your over-the-counter. I think those are your bottom-of-the-barrel budget. At a bare minimum, use water-based lube. Your higher-end lube is silicone lube. Caution this with some sex toys that are silicone-based, but with the really high-end sex toys, it tends to be okay. I just don't want anybody to wreck their expensive tools. Really nice because it's longer lasting, right? Silicone doesn't get absorbed into the skin, which is why it's great, especially in that perimenopausal, menopausal skin that tends to be more dry. So, silicone lobes. Awesome. Watch if you spill it on the floor, it's very, very slippery, and I don't want anybody to hurt themselves. So watch if you're using it in the shower or in the bathroom. Then there's some oil-based lubes. There's hybrid lubes which are a combination of water and silicone. So you get the best of both worlds. I see young women in their early 20s. They come in to see me for pain with sex. The first question I never ask, do you use lube? I always ask the question, what type of lube do you use? Because I really want to normalize that it's part of a healthy sexual function. And a couple of women, they'll say, well, my boyfriend told me I shouldn't need to use lube. And here she is coming to see a surgeon because she's having pain with sex. To me, I'm like, we've got to get the word out. Lube is to help people have pleasure, to avoid pain, to make sex fun. It's cheap use. Lube. Yeah, absolutely. And there's different kinds of lubes. Even within those categories, there's different kinds of lubes that you can try. There's warming lubes, cooling lubes. And you can kind of have fun with it. I would caution that if you use water-based lubes, you need to reapply depending on how long you're having sex for. Because it does dry up and so they're great to use. But just make sure that you're using them liberally and often. Yep. And her wetness doesn't mean anything about. So there's something called arousal-desire mismatch, right? So she can be desiring sex, but she doesn't have the moisture down there, and that can happen more and more with age as estrogen levels drop and that skin becomes more dry. So the arousal-desire mismatch means she might be very interested in sex, and just not have the lubrication she needs to protect those sensor structures. Another thing to think about is desire mismatch in a relationship. Oftentimes stereotypically, but not always, the man has a higher sex drive than the woman does. That doesn't mean that the woman is the broken one in this scenario. It just means she's desiring some level of sex and a guy's desiring more, very, very common. People think that their relationship is broken over, that most people have desire mismatch in their relationship, because it's two people trying to get along in the world, right? Like I like Cheerios and he likes oatmeal. It's okay. We're two different people. What we need to do is meet in the middle and match and to say, hey, working with these two desires, How can we make it satisfying for both people, and the man knowing he doesn't have to get all of his pleasure, enjoyment, and orgasms from the woman, right? He certainly can involve her in may and some self-pleasure or alone time. But take the pressure off of the low desire person. The low desire person doesn't want to say no all the time. Right? They just feel like, oh, I can't go to that higher level. I don't like running marathons, and my husband likes, running doesn't. For me to try to run marathons would be a huge stress on me. Right? It's simply just not what I want to do. So desire mismatch. Communicate about it, and you're gonna get a lot farther than trying to avoid it. And that's my last tip is communication skills, talking about intimacy. What it means to you, what you want, the type of intimacy you want to have or trying new things is really important. And part of how people build intimacy in their relationships. Tips for communication. Do it outside the bedroom. Do it while clothed, perhaps over lunch or a cup of coffee, and revisit it. It doesn't go well the first time because we've never gotten trained in how to communicate about sex. It's really uncomfortable for a lot of people. So know that the communication can be ongoing. And if you look at people who have successful happy sex lives, they're communicating. It's absolutely essential. Yes. And as you mentioned, communication can be super awkward at times for yourself and your partner, and just don't take it personally. Like if they react in a funny way when you bring it up because they just feel awkward. So just take some time and open this up, but try not to get personally offended, and just keep at it because this is what you need for a very happy, healthy sex life, and happy, healthy relationship. Totally another communication tip is make it about you. Meaning I feel I want more intimacy instead of you don't want to have sex enough. So just make sure the tone on that is very much inclusive about your needs, and not what's wrong with the other person. You're gonna get way farther with that talk. Awesome. And guys, if your partner is having issues in the bedroom, have them see a urologist. Ideally someone who specializes in sexual health. But to see a urologist, and we're more than happy to help you, get through some of the issues that your spouse may be feeling, and of course yourself as well. We're always happy to help men who are having issues with erections, ejaculation, all of the above. Totally other tips for that is to see a sex therapist. You can go to the AEC website, ASECT, the American Association of Certified Sex Therapists. I think they're exceptional. They're basically therapists that are just comfortable talking about sex.